Chapter 1. Rumors in Skavenblight. The fetid underpass of Skavenblight was alive with the frantic whispers of his kin, the endless scurrying and chittering that could mask deadly secrets if one listened closely enough. Greyseer Skritch was used to such sounds, each footfall, or muttered word a piece of a larger, dangerous puzzle that held him on constant alert. But today, a new murmur reached his ear, one that pricked his senses like a fresh dose of warpstone. The murmur spoke of the Blackcinder volcano, a mountain long forgotten by all but the most ancient of Skaven records. Its fiery depths were rumored to hold a warpstone vein of such potency that it could alter the balance of power among the clans. An unclaimed resource of this magnitude would allow him to surpass the other Greyseers, even gain a foothold in the Council of 13, if he played his cards right. Skritch's pulse quickened, the idea blooming in his mind like the first breath of a dark scheme. Warpstone. The very thought of it conjured a deep craving within him, one that pulsed at the base of his skull, coiling around his thoughts. Skritch had seen lesser Skaven die from overexposure to even the smallest amounts of the stuff, but he was no common rat. His connection to the horned rat himself, his mastery of arcane arts, those made him worthy to wield Warpstone, to shape it to his will. And if the rumors were true, if Blackcinder volcano truly harbored a vast reserve of the sacred material, it could make him unstoppable. But such a prize would not come easily. Blackcinder volcano lay far beyond the borders of Skavenblight, nestled in the wildlands, where even the bravest clans dared not tread without reason. Worse still, other Greyseers might already be sniffing about, their own warp dreams leading them to the same prize. And yet, the thought of conquest, of binding this volatile power to his own claws, was too enticing to resist. The path would be treacherous, no doubt riddled with treachery and traps, but that was the Skaven way. Nothing great was won without the sacrifice of others, and Skritch knew better than any how to make use of expendable lives. Lost in his musings, Skritch felt a claw tugging at his robe, drawing him out of his scheming. It was a ragged slave, its beady eyes cast downward as it groveled. The creature had overheard something important, or so it claimed, its words tumbling out in a high-pitched whine. Greyseer. Yes, wise one. I brought news, important words, wise secrets. The slave squeaked, trembling under his gaze. Skritch sneered, curling his tail around his foot in annoyance. Speak, worm, or I'll tear out your tongue-tails for wasting my time. The slave nodded vigorously, clutching its filthy paws together. Yes. Rumors, whispers say the Blackcinder's open. Yes. A collapse, a quake, uncovered the old tunnels, rich with warpstone veins, untouched and fresh. Other clans smell it, yes, and they plan to go. Skritch's gaze sharpened, the slave's words fueling the inferno of his ambitions. The mountain itself had opened its secrets to him. The timing was suspiciously convenient, almost as if it were a summons from the horned rat himself. This was no mere coincidence, this was fate. He dismissed the slave with a wave of his claw, ignoring its pitiful, pleading squeaks for food or coin. There would be nothing but silence now. A clear head to plan his path forward. Blackcinder would be his, and with it, enough warpstone to defy even the most cunning rivals in Skavenblight. Skritch's mind was quick, darting through a dozen plots at once. He would need a warband, disposable bodies to shield him from the hazards that lurked in the depths of Blackcinder. More importantly, he would need someone capable of managing the volatile nature of warpstone. Skritch's spells were powerful, yes, but to draw out the raw, unchecked energy from a source as vast as Blackcinder's vein would require the intricate workings of a machine as much as magic. His thoughts turned to one particular Skaven, a Warlock Engineer named Kreezh. Kreezh had a mind almost as twisted as Skritch's own, filled with ideas of mechanical horrors and weaponized contraptions. He had a notorious reputation in Clan Skryre, both for his genius and his recklessness. Skritch grimaced at the thought of working with such an unpredictable ally, but necessity often demanded unpleasant allies. Kreezh will do nicely, Skritch murmured to himself, a twisted smile curling on his muzzle. Yes, the alliance would be a delicate one, and temporary, of course. Kreezh would help him harness the warpstone, perhaps even improve upon the crude machines Clan Skryre typically produced. And when they stood at the precipice, at the very edge of victory, well, a simple spell would rid Skritch of any loose ends. Kreezh could be a useful instrument. Like any blade or spear, one Skritch would dispose of as soon as it served its purpose. As he slunk back into the shadows, thoughts of Warpstone and conquest racing through his mind, Skritch could feel the thrill of destiny winding around him, binding him to the volatile heart of Blackcinder. He could already feel the weight of power resting on his claws, the Warpstone whispering his name in the darkness. In a world where betrayal was currency, where ambition gnawed at every clawed heart, Skritch knew he was destined for greatness. And by the time he returned to Skavenblight, his rivals would tremble before him, or perish in his shadow. Chapter 2. The Alliance. Greyseer Skritch prowled the labyrinthine corridors of Skavenblight, his mind fixed on his plan as he approached the darkened enclave of Clan Skryre. He could smell the acrid stench of warped fuel and scorched metal long before he reached the iron-barred gate, the hallmark of the Warlock Engineers and their peculiar, volatile inventions. This was the domain of Warlock Engineer Kreezh, a mad genius notorious for both his brilliance and his disregard for the lives of those around him. Perfect. As he entered, a low hum of energy pulsed through the air, almost singing to the warpstone pendant he wore around his neck. Skritch ignored the stares of the Skryre acolytes, each one muttering as he passed, no doubt puzzled at the sight of a Greyseer straying so far into their territory. Let them mutter, he thought. They'd have more reason to fear him soon enough. At last, Skritch reached Kreezh's chamber, a smoky den filled with half-finished contraptions, rusted gears, and cages of squealing test subjects. The engineer himself hunched over a table, clutching a small, sputtering device in his claws, adjusting it with feverish intensity. The device sparked wildly, sending tendrils of greenish light into the air as Kreezh muttered to himself, barely noticing his visitor. Kreezh, Skritch's voice cut through the murmur of the workshop, sharp and commanding. You tinker with useless toys while the real power of the Under-Empire waits, hidden, just beyond your grasp. Kreezh's ears twitched, and he looked up, narrowing his eyes. Greyseer Skritch. To what do I owe the unexpected pleasure? His voice was laden with sarcasm, his tail flicking back and forth. Skritch bit back a sneer, knowing that mutual disdain was the price of dealing with a mind like Kreezh. I come with a proposition, one that could reward you beyond your wildest imaginings. But it is only for those daring enough to seize it. Kreezh set the sparking device aside, finally giving Skritch his full attention. Speak, then. Enlighten me, if you can. Taking a slow, deliberate step forward, Skritch allowed a knowing smile to creep across his face. You've heard the rumors about Blackcinder volcano, yes? The collapse has revealed opportunities. Warpstone, Kreezh. Enough warpstone to make even the horned rat himself take notice. Kreezh's eyes gleamed with sudden interest, his earlier dismissal evaporating. Blackcinder, it's only a legend, and even if it were true, the volcano is nothing but a boiling pit of death. Getting there alone would be a fool's errand. Skritch nodded, letting the notion hang in the air, baiting Kreezh's curiosity. And yet, with the right combination of magic and machinery, it could be done. I've seen the veins myself, felt the raw energy pulsing beneath the earth. I simply need someone capable of helping me harness it. Kreezh's tail froze mid-flick, and his mouth opened in a crooked grin. Warpstone in such quantity, it could fuel my devices for centuries. The possibilities, he paused, eyes narrowing suspiciously. But why come to me, Greyseer? You have your spells, your prophecies. Surely you don't need the crude machinations of Clan Skryre. Skritch allowed himself a dry chuckle. Even a Greyseer knows his limits, Kreezh. Warpstone in such amounts is volatile, too unstable for mere sorcery. I need the precision of your craftsmanship to draw out its true potential. Together, we could achieve what neither of us could alone. Kreezh considered this, scratching his chin thoughtfully. And what's in it for you, Greyseer? The thought of you sharing power so generously doesn't sit right with me. Skritch suppressed a flicker of irritation. This one thought himself clever, a dangerous trait. But he needed Kreezh, at least for now. What I seek is control, Kreezh, mastery over the Warpstone, over the very fabric of the Under Empire. And you, Warlock Engineer, could become the greatest architect of the Skaven future, known across all clans. You descend beyond clan scryery, beyond even the Council of 13. The ambition glinted in Kreezh's eyes, almost palpable. But still, he hesitated. And the dangers. Blackcinder is a death trap, with fumes that could melt a Skaven's flesh, and molten rivers that would consume any who dared draw too close. Skritch shrugged, feigning indifference. You have your gadgets, your contraptions, yes? I trust your engineering skills are not just for show. I can shield us from some of the more elemental hazards, and your machines can handle the rest. Kreezh's smile returned, sly and hungry. If what you say is true, Greyseer, then perhaps I will join you. But on one condition. If we reach this vein, and the power proves sufficient, then I alone will command the machines needed to extract it. You may cast your spells, weave your little prophecies, but the machines will obey my command. Skritch's eyes narrowed. Kreezh was bolder than he'd anticipated, yet this arrogance could be his downfall. After all, machines were nothing without the mind that drove them, and Skritch's mind was the sharpest tool in the Under Empire. He could play along, for now. Very well, Skritch agreed with a slow nod. But remember, Kreezh, once we stand upon that Warpstone vein, there will be no place for doubt. Any hesitation, any failure, and you'll find yourself left behind. Kreezh's grin widened, and he extended a greasy clawed paw. We understand each other, then, to the Blackcinder Volcano, Greyseer, and to our mutual ambitions. Skritch shook the outstretched claw, a strange sensation of finality settling over him. This alliance was an uneasy one, a coalition born of necessity rather than trust. But with the promise of Warpstone vast enough to bend the very laws of reality, he could endure Kreezh's hubris for a time. As Skritch turned to leave, a dark plan began to take root in his mind. Kreezh might be useful, yes, and his machines essential. But once they had the Warpstone in their grasp, the Warlock Engineer would be expendable. A simple spell, a quick betrayal, and the Warpstone's full power would be his and his alone. In the shadows of Clan Scryer's hall, with the scent of scorched metal filling his nostrils, Greyseer Skritch allowed himself a satisfied smirk. The path to Blackcinder was perilous, but the prize at its end would be worth any risk, any sacrifice. And once he wielded that power, the Under Empire itself would tremble beneath his claws. Chapter 3. Into the Depths. Greyseer Skritch adjusted his hood, pulling it tighter against the thin wisps of toxic fumes that leaked from the walls around him. The narrow tunnel wound deep beneath the earth, twisting and descending in maddening curves that seemed to taunt him with their endless, unrelenting darkness. Behind him, a mixed warband of clan rats and scryer engineers trudged along, their breaths heavy, eyes darting nervously as they whispered among themselves. The Skaven were used to darkness, to damp and rot. But this was different. The Blackcinder volcano's inside seemed almost alive, the walls throbbing with faint pulses of warp energy that prickled Skritch's skin, filling his mind with strange, echoing whispers. Each step closer to the heart of the volcano felt like a step into the horned rat's own waiting jaws. Kreezh skittered close behind him, his breath wheezing beneath a protective, haphazardly crafted mask that crackled faintly with every inhalation. The Warlock Engineer looked almost jubilant, his eyes bright with a manic glow that spoke of both excitement and unrestrained madness. Skritch had to admit, for all his contempt of Kreezh's obsession with machinery, the engineer's single-minded drive was a sight to behold. At least, for now. Greyseer, Kreezh's muffled voice crackled through the mask. The air's thick with fumes. If the others fall, they'll be useless. We should limit their exposure. Yes. Keep them fresh for when we reach the Warpstone. Skritch sneered, barely sparing him a glance. If they fall, they're weak. What I need is not strength of muscle, but strength of will. The Warpstone's power will choose those fit to stand beside me. Kreezh hesitated, casting a wary eye over the warband. Most of them were grim-faced, tails twitching as they glanced around the tunnel, wary of every shadow. A few already showed signs of warpstone sickness, sweat pooling beneath their fur, twitching paws, glazed eyes. The deeper they went, the heavier the air became, thick with an unseen, pulsing energy that made each breath feel heavier, hotter, until it clawed its way down their throats. They pressed on, the silence broken only by the distant rumble of magma flows, somewhere deep beneath them, and the skittering of claws on rock. The narrow tunnel widened at last, leading them into a cavern so vast that the darkness itself seemed to have swallowed it whole. The walls were laced with veins of warpstone, shimmering faintly with a sickly green light that illuminated the cavern's twisted features. Stalactites hung from above, and the ground was uneven, littered with warped rock formations that jutted from the floor like teeth from a gaping maw. The sight of the warpstone veins filled Skritch with a thrill he could barely contain. He could feel its raw, unfiltered energy pulsing through the air, like the rhythmic beat of a heart, calling to him. This was the power he sought, the force that would raise him above the other Greyseers, above even the Council of 13. Kreezh, too, was enraptured, his eyes darting across the shimmering veins with a mix of awe and greed. Incredible, he breathed, almost reverently. Enough warpstone to fuel Skrier's machines for centuries. Imagine the power. Skritch's lips curled into a thin smile. Focus, Kreezh. I didn't bring you here to drool like a slave over scraps. We have work to do. Kreezh's eyes narrowed, but he nodded, pulling out a warped metal device from his pack. This will stabilize the fumes for a time, but the deeper we go, the greater the risk. I don't know if even my machines can withstand the raw power we're dealing with. Skritch sneered. Then build better machines. The warpstone demands devotion, sacrifice. If it breaks you, it was not meant for you. As Kreezh began setting up his equipment, a sudden screech from one of the clan rats shattered the eerie silence. The creature had wandered too close to one of the warpstone veins, and its fur was smoking, flesh blistering as it let out a high-pitched wail. The other clan rats jumped back, huddling close to Skritch, as they watched their comrade convulse, its eyes rolling back before it collapsed in a heap, twitching, its body pulsing faintly with residual warp energy. Skritch stepped forward, inspecting the unfortunate creature's charred form with disdain. The warpstone tests us, he announced, his voice carrying through the cavern. Those too weak to endure its might will not see the mountain's heart. His words were enough to keep the warband moving, though he could see the fear in their eyes. Let them fear, he thought. Fear was a tool, a leash he could use to keep them in line. The promise of power dangled just beyond reach, a beacon that would drive them to follow him even into the depths of the horned rat's own realm. They pushed onward, deeper into the heart of the cavern, moving from one tunnel to the next, as the air grew hotter, thick with the acrid stench of sulfur and molten rock. The further they went, the more the warpstone veins thickened, filling the walls until they seemed to glow from within, casting an otherworldly light that danced across the warband's faces. At the front, Skritch felt his own power growing with every step. The warpstone resonated with him, its energy coursing through his veins, sharpening his senses, filling him with a heady sense of invincibility. This was his destiny, his path to power. Soon he would drink deeply of this potent force and claim it as his own. And no one, not the Council, not Kreezh, not even the horned rat himself, would stand in his way. Suddenly, a low growl echoed from one of the tunnels, a deep, guttural sound that sent a chill down Skritch's spine. He froze, his ears twitching as he strained to locate the source. The warband fell silent, eyes wide as they gripped their weapons, glancing around in terror. From the darkness, a massive shape emerged, its form barely visible in the dim light. A hulking creature with twisted, gnarled limbs and glowing, red eyes, its skin cracked and bubbling, as if it were forged from molten stone. A creature born from the very heart of the volcano, a guardian of the warpstone's secrets. Kreezh let out a gasp, scrambling backward, but Skritch held his ground, his eyes narrowing as he raised his staff. "Hold," he commanded, voice steely. "This beast guards what is ours. We shall not be turned aside by any mindless creature." With a quick, decisive motion, Skritch began to chant, his voice echoing through the cavern as he summoned the raw energy of the warpstone to his aid. The creature let out a furious roar, advancing toward him, claws bared, but Skritch stood firm, feeling the warp energy flowing into him, feeding his spell, amplifying it to a level he'd never felt before. A bolt of searing green light shot from his staff, striking the creature square in the chest. It stumbled, letting out a pained roar, but the impact only seemed to enrage it further. The beast lunged forward, swinging its massive claws with deadly force. "Kreezh," Skritch barked, glancing over his shoulder. "Now would be a good time to show your worth." With a curse, Kreezh scrambled to his feet, pulling a lever on one of his machines. A whirring, grinding noise filled the air, and a spray of greenish gas erupted from the device, enveloping the creature. It recoiled, clawing at the air, its movements slowing as the gas seeped into its skin. Taking advantage of its disorientation, Skritch unleashed another bolt of energy, this one more potent than the last. The creature staggered, its red eyes dimming, and with a final, gurgling snarl, it collapsed to the ground, twitching before falling still. The warband watched in awe, their fear momentarily replaced by reverence. Skritch smirked, feeling the intoxicating thrill of victory. The depths of Blackcinder were not so easily conquered, but he had proven himself stronger, more cunning than any mindless beast. As they continued onward, deeper into the mountain's heart, Skritch allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. They were close now, close enough to taste the warpstone's potent energy. And once it was his, nothing, not beast, machine or Warlock Engineer, would stand in his way. Chapter 4. Reval Intrusion. The deeper they descended into the blackened heart of the volcano, the more the mountain seemed to pulse with an ominous life. Skritch's warband trailed behind him, the faint green glow of warpstone from their earlier battles illuminating their narrow path. But Skritch's instincts nagged at him. He felt a prickle of unease, a familiar sensation like claws scratching against his thoughts, a warning. He sniffed the air, noticing a faint, unfamiliar scent beneath the pervasive stench of sulfur and charred stone. It was the scent of rot, but not the usual decay that permeated Skavenblight. This was a foulness steeped in pestilence, a sickness so intense it clung to the air like a shroud. Skritch's whiskers twitched in irritation. Clan pestilence. His rival's signature filth lay thick in the air, mingling with the warpstone's energy, creating a potent blend that made his skin crawl. He stopped abruptly, motioning to his warband. The other Skaven halted, nervously adjusting their weapons as they looked around the shadowed cavern. Skritch strained his ears, listening past the distant rumble of magma. Faintly, he heard it. The soft, rhythmic scrape of claws against rock, the rustling of fabric, whispers in a language laced with the hissing venom of curses. Somewhere in the dark, Clan Pestilence was lying in wait. He cursed inwardly. Of course the other clans would be drawn to Blackcinder like rats to fresh scraps. News of Warpstone spread quickly, and with Clan Pestilence already sniffing about, there was no telling how many others might follow. He clenched his claws around his staff, feeling the warp energy within it pulse in sync with his rising ire. If they thought to take what was rightfully his, they would learn the folly of crossing Greyseer Skritch. Signaling silently to Kreezh, Skritch crept forward, his every sense heightened. The warband followed, keeping to the shadows, their footsteps hushed. The distant green glow grew stronger as they moved, casting eerie shadows along the walls. Just beyond the curve of a rock formation, Skritch spotted them, a small group of Pestilence plague monks, their bodies swathed in rotting cloth, their movements twitchy and irregular, like creatures possessed. They muttered their incantations in low, feverish tones, their words barely audible. Skritch's nose wrinkled at the sight of them, his fur prickling in distaste. Plague monks, they were little more than mindless zealots, pawns to be used and discarded. But their foul magic was nothing to underestimate. He could feel their pestilent aura, a sickly haze that thickened the air around them. One misstep, and his own warband could be infected, turned into writhing masses of disease and rot. Kreezh whispered at his side, barely containing his impatience. "They stand between us and the warpstone. Greyseer, what is your command? Skritch narrowed his eyes, assessing the situation. A full confrontation would be messy, any skirmish here would not go unnoticed, and other Skaven clans would scent the violence from miles away. No, he needed to deal with them swiftly and quietly, and he needed to do it in a way that would send a clear message to anyone else lurking in these depths. Let them believe they are safe, secure in their ignorance, he murmured, formulating a plan. He turned to his warband, his voice low and commanding. Flank them from the shadows. I will draw their eyes forward while you surround them, yes, silent as the darkness. The warband dispersed, melting into the shadows along the rock walls, their figures barely visible in the dim light. Skritch approached the plague monks directly, his staff held high, the warpstone embedded within it, casting an unnatural glow. The plague monks stiffened, turning toward him, their eyes glinting with hostility and fevered zeal. Brothers of pestilence, he called, his voice ringing through the cavern, you stand in the presence of a Greyseer. Do you dare to claim what is mine? The lead monk, a gaunt creature with sores covering its snout, took a shaky step forward. This place belongs to the pestilent lord. We are the chosen of decay, the blessed of rot. Turn back or be unmade. Skritch laughed, a cold, hollow sound that echoed off the cavern walls. Unmade? You think your sickness can touch me? He raised his staff, channeling the warpstone's energy, letting it flare brilliantly. I am blessed by the horned rat himself. Stand aside, or feel the wrath of powers far beyond your pitiful afflictions. The plague monks hesitated, their eyes flickering with uncertainty, even fear. And that's when Skritch gave the signal. His warband struck from the shadows in a flurry of snarls and sharp claws, descending upon the monks from all sides. The pestilence rats let out startled screeches, caught off guard, their formation breaking under the sudden assault. Skritch focused his attention on the lead monk, who snarled in defiance, raising a pestilence-covered claw. A sickly green glow emanated from the creature, a cloud of festering rot aimed directly at Skritch. But Skritch was faster. With a flick of his staff, he unleashed a blast of warp energy, striking the monk square in the chest. The monk's defiant hiss turned to a choking gasp as the energy consumed him, his body convulsing as it twisted and disintegrated into a pile of smoldering ash. The remaining plague monks faltered, their zeal breaking under the onslaught. Skritch's warband tore through them with ruthless efficiency, their blades flashing, claws rending flesh. It was over in moments, the cavern falling silent once more, the bodies of the fallen pestilence rats scattered across the ground. Kreezh approached, looking almost disappointed at the quickness of the victory. I expected more of a challenge from those zealots, he muttered, kicking aside one of the bodies with a sneer. Skritch allowed himself a small, satisfied smile, his eyes glinting as he surveyed the scene. They are mere vermin, like all who dare to stand before me. They live only to die for their foolish causes. He turned to his warband, his voice rising. Let this be a lesson. We are not alone here, and others will come, drawn by the same hunger for power. But we are the ones who will take the prize. We are the chosen. The warband let out a fierce chittering, their loyalty renewed, their spirits bolstered by the swift victory. Skritch watched them with a shrewd gaze, knowing well that loyalty among Skaven was a fleeting thing, driven by fear and ambition. But for now, it would serve. He turned to Kreezh, a hint of warning in his gaze. Remember this, Warlock Engineer. Blackcinder's depths will test us, and others will seek to tear us down. Stay vigilant, or you may find yourself overwhelmed in your own lust for power. Kreezh sneered, but there was respect in his eyes, a grudging acknowledgement of Skritch's cunning. I have no intentions of failing Greyseer. The warpstone waits, and I intend to see it in our claws. Skritch nodded, though his thoughts remained dark and calculating. He knew Kreezh was clever, perhaps too clever, but the warpstone was close now. He could feel its presence, a thrumming pulse that resonated with his own desires, filling him with a deep, consuming hunger. Soon he would claim it, harness its power, and rise above all others. As they moved forward, Skritch allowed himself a final glance at the fallen pestilence monks, their bodies a stark reminder of the price of ambition. He relished the thought of more rivals meeting similar fates, sacrificed on the altar of his own ascent. For in the depths of Blackcinder, only the strong, the ruthless, and the cunning would survive. And Skritch knew he was all of these things. Chapter 5. First Glimpse of Power. The tunnel narrowed as they pressed further, the air growing hotter, thicker with an intoxicating blend of sulfur, ash, and the sharp tang of warpstone. Greyseer Skritch could feel it now, a pulsing, rhythmic energy thrumming through the rock beneath his feet, resonating with his very bones. The heart of Blackcinder was close. Ahead, the rock began to shimmer with faint green veins like blood pulsing through the mountain. The glow illuminated the twisted, jagged walls, casting an eerie, spectral light that played upon the faces of his warband. Their expressions wavered between awe and terror, tails twitching as they took in the sight. Even Kreezh, normally so calm, had gone silent, his eyes wide as he studied the veins with a near-reverent gaze. "Do you feel it, Kreezh?" Skritch's voice was low, a satisfied hiss as he swept his gaze across the warpstone veins. "This is more than just power. It is potential, the raw energy of the horned rat himself, waiting to be harnessed, to be bent to my will." Kreezh barely glanced at him, his focus riveted on the warpstone-laced rock. "Such a deposit," he murmured, awe lacing his voice, "could fuel the war machines of Clan Skryre for centuries. It's unspoiled, pure, but dangerous." Skritch ignored the hint of caution. He knew the dangers well enough. Warpstone was volatile, unbridled power, and this close to the source, its energy was raw, fierce, and unpredictable. But he was a Greyseer, a conduit of the horned rat. This was his element. All he had to do was reach out and take it. He raised his staff, feeling the warpstone embedded within it respond to the energy around him, humming with a resonance that set his fur on edge. Slowly, deliberately, he began to chant, his voice low and rhythmic, drawing the warpstone's energy toward him. The veins in the walls flared brighter, reacting to his call, pulsing in sync with his incantation. A sudden surge of power shot through him, sharp and hot, igniting every nerve in his body. Skritch barely suppressed a gasp, his vision blurring as the raw energy filled him, crackling through his veins like wildfire. For a moment he felt as if he could see everything. The sprawling tunnels of Skavenblight, the churning chaos of the Under Empire, all of it connected by invisible threads of power, stretching out from Blackcinder like a web. In that heartbeat, he understood. This was not just a mere deposit of warpstone. It was a nexus, a source from which the power of the Under Empire flowed, and it was his to command. But as quickly as the vision came, it faded, the energy receding, leaving Skritch feeling both exhilarated and hollow. He steadied himself, his claws clutching his staff as he suppressed the tremor in his limbs. The power had only granted him a glimpse, a tantalizing taste of what lay within reach. But he knew that to truly wield it, he would need more than a mere spell. He needed a way to channel it, to control it. Kreezh approached, his gaze sharp and calculating. "I saw what you did, Greyseer. You're playing with forces even a Greyseer may struggle to contain. Warpstone on this scale could tear your mind apart if you're not careful." Skritch sneered, dismissing the Warlock Engineer's warning. "You speak of limits, Kreezh, because you have only tasted the scraps of power. I was chosen by the horned rat to wield such energy. My mind is as boundless as the power itself." Kreezh's eyes gleamed, a dangerous glint that Skritch did not miss. "Perhaps," Kreezh replied, his tone even. "But even boundless power needs direction, control. That's where I come in." He pulled a small device from his satchel, a crude, rusted contraption covered in wires and warped metal, with a sharp-edged crystal embedded in its core. Kreezh held it up, his claws dancing over the switches and gears as he spoke. "This device can amplify and regulate the warpstone energy, Greyseer. But without precise calibration, it will consume everything around it, including us. With my machines, however, we could tap directly into the warpstone veins and extract their power gradually, steadily." Skritch regarded the device with a mixture of intrigue and suspicion. He hated to rely on Skryre's clumsy machines. preferring the direct might of sorcery, the purity of a spell cast by his own claws. But Kreezh's device offered a stability he couldn't deny. If they were to channel this power fully, perhaps this crude machine could serve as a conduit. "Then set it up," Skritch ordered, his voice hard. "But know this, Kreezh, that device exists for one purpose only, to serve my will. The moment it fails or you hesitate, I'll leave you to rot in these depths." Kreezh chuckled, his eyes gleaming with a dangerous amusement. "Of course, Greyseer. My loyalty is as dependable as the warpstone veins themselves." He knelt, positioning the device carefully along the largest of the warpstone veins, muttering calculations under his breath as he adjusted the gears and settings. As he worked, Skritch felt the first tendrils of unease slithering through his mind. This place was not natural. It was alive, a thing of power and malevolence, and it watched him, its presence lurking just beyond his perception. The whispers grew louder as Kreezh activated his machine, the hum of warp energy filling the cavern, mingling with the low, resonant pulse of the mountain. The device sparked to life, the crystal in its core glowing a bright, sickly green. The warpstone veins responded, their glow intensifying, threads of energy funneling into the machine, directed and contained by Kreezh's meticulous adjustments. The energy pulsed through the machine, stabilizing, becoming almost tangible. Skritch felt the power shift, directed now, controlled, flowing toward him in a steady, unwavering stream. He extended his claws, letting the energy seep into him, filling him, shaping itself to his will. For a brief, heady moment, he felt invincible, as though the entire Under-Empire lay at his feet, his to command. But then, the machine faltered, a sudden crackle of energy bursting from the device as the crystal wavered, flickering erratically. Skritch's eyes widened, and he staggered as the energy surged, uncontrolled, lashing out in wild, chaotic waves. A bolt of raw warpstone energy shot through the cavern, striking one of the warband members, who let out a strangled scream as his body twisted and contorted, consumed by the raw power until he dissolved into a pile of ash. Kreezh swore, frantically adjusting the machine, his claws darting over the controls. "Hold steady. It's too much. The energy is." "Fix it, Kreezh." Skritch's voice was a snarl, his eyes blazing with fury. He could feel the power slipping from his grasp, twisting back on itself, threatening to spiral out of control. With a final, desperate twist of a dial, Kreezh managed to stabilize the device, the energy flow evening out, becoming steady once more. Skritch exhaled, his grip on his staff tight as he regained control of the power, forcing it back under his command. The momentary lapse was maddening, infuriating, but he could not afford to show weakness, especially in front of Kreezh. "This is the true nature of warpstone," Skritch hissed, his voice low and dangerous. "Raw, wild, untamable, but I will master it no matter the cost." Kreezh met his gaze, an unreadable expression flickering across his face. "Then you will need both sorcery and machine to harness it. Even the greatest power demands structure, or it will consume everything." Skritch's lip curled, though he held his tongue. He hated to admit it, but Kreezh was right. Without the Warlock Engineer's machines, the Warpstone's energy would tear them apart before they ever reached the mountain's heart. As they continued forward, deeper into the mountain's depths, Skritch felt a cold, consuming resolve settle within him. The Warpstone veins grew thicker, pulsing brighter, each step bringing him closer to the source, the ultimate power that lay within Blackcinder's heart. The glimpse of power had shown him what was possible, but it was only the beginning. By the time he emerged from this cursed mountain, the Warpstone would be his to wield, and the Under-Empire would tremble in the wake of his ascent. And if Kreezh proved useful along the way, so be it. But if he failed? Well, Skritch had never hesitated to remove obstacles before.